Hide your daughters, your underage daughters. The new Attorney General is here. I am mining investor and editor of Resource Stock Digest, head out of the Del Real, here with my partner, Mr. Nick Hodge, who's also an investor and, of course, the publisher of Daily Profit Cycle, among other hats the gentleman wears. This is the 293rd episode of our weekly therapy session that we call Investing in Bizarro World. We're going to talk the Trumpster, cabinet nominations, gold breakdown, Bitcoin breakout, dollar breakout. We're going to get into all the ups, the downs, the sideways, and the bizarro world that gets more bizarre by the day. Nick, before we do all that, got to ask you, sir, how are you this fine day?
They're appointing everybody up in here. That's what it seems like. You got to hide your kids and hide your wife, like you said. I am doing wonderful, Gerardo. I'm a ultra wealthy Wall Street tycoon, obviously, if you listen to the folks in Washington State who write the ballots. I've got some warrants that are in the money, and I own a bit of Bitcoin. And as you say, the family loves me. So doing all right. How are you?
Excellent. The same. Wife still loves me. The kids still love me. They're healthy. They're healthy mentally. They're healthy physically. Thriving and getting ahead. And look, it's 84 degrees here just outside of Austin, Texas. So going into a weekend, couldn't be more excited to close the year out strong. Thankful, right? Thanksgiving is coming up here soon. Really thankful for what's been a phenomenal couple of years and starting to see the next round of opportunities that might be able to duplicate or even exceed the last couple of years. So obviously we can, get into that here later on in the podcast, but just fair warning up front, guys. I think by now y'all know Mr. Hodge and I don't really toe the partisan lines too much. I think I speak for the both of us when I say we don't like most of the people on either side, right? And so when we talk, and we will talk because it's going to be consequential to the markets and what we do for a living, but when we talk cabinet nominations and nominees and our disdain for the bulk of them, please don't take that as a partisan thing or do so. I mean, you can take it how you want it, but it's definitely not intended that way. It really is intended to be factual and to look forward. As the great Wayne Gretzky liked to say, you got to shoot and go where the puck is going, not where it is. And that, unfortunately, today's reality requires that we delve into some of the stuff that's going on politically because it is a fourth turning and it is very, very consequential. So the Trumpster is in. I had a phenomenal podcast last week with Mr. Chris Curl, who I thought was very articulate. I thought he was very accurate. He's absolutely smoked the Bitcoin call. For those junior resource members and those of you that wrote in asking for your free trial, I really hope, and let's extend it, another week, right? Get a free month of Chris Curl's Crypto Cycle. His service is crypto service. It's the best in the industry. Those of you that took advantage of it last week are already profiting from some of those calls. So let's start with breakouts. We got to start with Bitcoin, right? I mean, it touched a high of 94,000 on speculation that, the Trumpster is going to be very friendly. Two, there's whispers, and they're just whispers at this point, but two, he's talking about potentially a strategic reserve consisting largely or wholly of Bitcoin. So that, of course, is going to go ahead and ramp up the price. And then he's also talking on nominees and getting out a lot of the people that were very anti-crypto and not friendly to the legislation. So a lot there. Thoughts on where the price is, thoughts on where it might continue to go. You, Mr. Hodge, are the gentleman that dabbles more in that space, as I dabbled exclusively almost in the resource space. But thoughts on Bitcoin and where it's headed?
Yeah, it's been incredible to watch. Bitcoin called the election. That was the first thing that told me that Donald Trump won. I think my first tweet early that evening, before any states were called or before Polymarket had sort of, been decided, was that, Bitcoin is speaking. It was breaking out to the upside in a vertical candle. And, the market knows, right? The market discounts and prices in the future. And it was pricing in a Trump victory in a very big way in terms of Bitcoin and other cryptos, which we can talk about. There are senators who are very much on board. I was writing about in the November issue of Foundational Profits. That very week, you had sitting U.S. senators, specifically Cynthia Lummis from the great state of Wyoming, tweeting laser eyes, tweeting in all caps that she was ready to start a Bitcoin reserve. This isn't some random laser-eyed
Right.
person on the interwebs. This is one of 100 U.S. sitting senators, right? So it's definitely getting some movement. And then at the same time, you wonder why, because we talk about. I'm going to talk about a bunch of things here. So get your popcorn or your soup or your tea or whatever it is you want to sip on. We talk about Bitcoin being a liquidity trade, right? And the last time it really ran was on the back of stimulus and money printing, and global liquidity, Chinese stimulus, right? And yet we have, and it's sort of funny because it ties directly into it. We have here the Department of Government Efficiency being launched with
Doge.
Elon Musk and Doge, right? With Dogecoin then appreciating significantly and talking about how we're going to cut significant waste from the government. $2 trillion in the next 2 years, I think is the number I might have heard, something
That's the
like that.
goal. And I'm all for that, just to be clear.
Absolutely. Except, there's a couple of not problems. There's just a couple of, inconsistencies
Realities?
with that. Yeah. And traditional correlations. Like you said, we got to start with breakouts. Well, you also have to talk about the US dollar, which rocketed to 105, right? On the
Kissing
DXY
107 as we
index.
speak.
So that's more than a 12-month high, right?
Yeah.
So you have to sort of hold these various narratives and in your head, right? He's going to clean up the government and he's going to cut the spending, which makes the dollar strong. But at the same time, it's Bitcoin and crypto has typically been a liquidity asset. And if he's going to cut all the waste and not do the stimulus and the government pork, then there's not going to be liquidity. So then why is Bitcoin going up? And it's because what we just said with a Bitcoin reserve. And, I don't know. Essentially, I saw a smart tweet this week saying we lost the plot, right? We're just in the middle of all this stuff, right? Like Fed is cutting, mortgage rates are going up, interest rates are going up, dollars going. Like it's just like we've lost the narrative for a little bit here, right? And we've really forgotten our history. Also in that November issue of Foundational Profits, I put a chart of the money supply, and I also put a chart from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. The money supply went up from 2016 to 2020. Your memory can serve up to you who was the president of the United States in those 4 years. I'm also old enough to remember Mr. Trump demanding his signature be on the first round of stimulus checks, which it kicked off the first round of inflation. I'm going to navigate.
No. I'm with you.
I saw a cartoon with it was Trump handing the Biden administration a bucket of inflation. And it was the Biden administration handing him back an economy and a stock market that was about to implode. Right? So this is a very good cartoon that was very much on the nose. And so the other thing that's happened, and I'll wrap this up, is, other Trump trades are going up. Like bank stocks are now leading. The financial sector, the S&P is leading even the communication sector, which is all the AI stocks and stuff. So you're getting a turning over in the market. And then you got to talk about the metals, right? Because gold's taking it on the chin. We were talking before we recorded about Mike Tyson having his fight coming up here. Well, gold just got punched in the mouth, right? It's down $250 since late October, from nearly $2,800 an ounce to a high 25 handle. You're going to ask me where support is. It's down around 25.30. If it gets there, you've got a real problem. So for like the next 3 to 6 months. So we're watching that. I'm watching that very closely. You should be watching that very closely. Selling gold and gold equities not out of the equation here.
Nope, not at all.
If gold continues to break down. And then last thing I'll say is we've talked recently about separating the wheat from the chaff. It's now easy to identify companies that have good projects, assets, management teams, and share structures. Going to get even easier because a lot of chaff just got separated here in the past week with, some mining stocks down 30-40%. So anyway, that's that. There's a lot there, but we started with crypto and ended with gold. I guess the last thing, I'm happy I own crypto. Before the election, I wrote an article about how I own it different ways. I own Bitcoin in my safe. I've told you this. I own paper Bitcoin, just like I own paper gold. I own Bitcoin mining companies, just like I own gold mining companies. And so it's very analogous. And I'm just a Bitcoin maxi, so I don't own anything else besides Bitcoin. and Bitcoin related companies. But Chris has, traded the Doge, and Solana is really the one that's gone up the most. And I don't dabble in some of that stuff. So I'd echo your sentiments. If you want to learn more about that or do some paper trading or follow his portfolio, by all means, take that free trial to CRC, because people are definitely interested. I was
Oh, yeah.
watching, I took my daughter to basketball practice last night, and I had friends texted me about the Doge, right? Like, what do you think about the Doge? So everybody wants to know, man.
Hey, look, people like to make money, right? You guys wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't. And there was a lot there. I want to go back to the nominees and the nominations because they're very consequential. You talked losing um the plot and the narrative not being very clear, and I want to add to that. Look, however you feel about Mr. Trump and however you feel about Marco Rubio as his defense secretary,
State.
oh, no, the Secretary of State, excuse me. I'm sorry, I was reading that Robert Kennedy Jr. just became the health secretary nominee. So vaccine stocks are down. Anyhow, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and again, this isn't about politics, this is about policy, is very, very pro-Israel and pro-war, coming out of a state that is very Israel-friendly in Florida. And it's not clear to me how, if we're not going to cut the defense budget and we're going to continue to provide Israel the arms that don't allow the Palestinian people the right to exist. This is no land, and let's be super clear. This is no longer about Israel's right to exist. They've destroyed every major hospital out there. They've trapped people in there. They've bombed the hell out of people that have nothing to do with anything. And Israel's got some of the best technology and the best targeting software, as they've demonstrated here over the past several months. It's clear it's a bomb it all approach. And if we as a country of taxpayers and our Secretary of State, if he's approved, if he's pushed through, Mr. Rubio is going to continue on that path, you can't address the budget. There's no way to trim trillions of dollars without looking at defense and addressing that in a very practical, matter-of-fact, mathematical way. If there is no appetite to, at the very least, rein in the amount of weapons and the amount of money that's going to the Ukraine and, to Israel through arms, then I just don't believe that this dollar strength continues, except for what I've told you for several months now, that the dollar to be going up with gold and the stock market at the same time was signaling to me more geopolitical volatility and tension. And look, again, however you feel about Mr. Rubio or Mr. Trump, this is so far, the nominations are very pro-war. Very pro-war. Yes, pro-business, anti-regulation, all for that. Elon Musk is a brilliant guy. Clearly, him being tasked with finding trillions of dollars of waste is an absolutely worthwhile endeavor, and I am rooting for him and the gentleman that's in charge of doing that. But there's going to have to be some tough decisions made, like I wrote about the day that we got the election results, and it's going to be interesting where the cuts come from and what goes away. And it gets more interesting by the minute, right? I joked about you hiding your daughters and your underage daughter specifically because the new attorney general is here. What's a joke, except it's not funny. This guy has been, he's going to be the law of the land, the top, person that decides who gets gone after and who goes away and who doesn't. And he's under investigation, not by the crazy Democrats, right? By his own party for trafficking underage girls. And look, there's rumors that, there's a report due out here in the next day or two that's very damning. I would be surprised if Mr. Matt Gaetz gets through. Of all the appointments, that is the one that I feel like he was put there to give both Republicans and Democrats some cover on some of the other nominees. Like, I'm going to throw you the one that I know is not going to get in there, and you'll look good like you won that one, because I just cannot believe that the United States of America is going to have Matt Gaetz as the next attorney general. And look, for those that go, oh, this report, maybe it's a witch hunt, or maybe it's not true, or maybe it doesn't exist and never comes out. The day he was nominated, he resigned. So I suspect somebody gave him a heads up of what was in there. And I suspect the reason he resigned was because he was about to get kicked out. We'll find out soon enough.
I don't know too much about Matt Gaetz. I read a couple articles last year when his name started coming up. I know he has probably the most punchable face in Congress.
Him and Ted
But
Cruz.
he's not dumb, and neither is Mr. Trump, obviously. And so I've just been doing some reading this week, and you already mentioned Mr. Rubio. Which state is Mr. Rubio from?
Florida.
Correct. What state is Mr. Gaetz from?
I forget what state he's
I
from.
believe he's from Florida.
Florida? Yeah.
And so Rubio's got to follow me. Rubio's got to vacate his Senate seat to become what you just said, Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
And then if Mr. Gaetz does not get appointed to Attorney General, as you just assumed, he could then be appointed to the Senate by Mr. Ron DeSantis. And so I think there's chess going on, man.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting if this report comes out. I don't care what party you're from.
Oh, and the report, the resignation stops the investigation is what I read. So I don't know if maybe the report can still come out, but I think the resignation halts the investigation is what the article that I read said. So chess, man. I think there's some chess going on.
Yeah, and again, the investigation may be stopped, but the report should absolutely come out. And again, that's not a partisan thing. It's Republicans leading the charge. It's his own party leading the charge. A lot of chess being played. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
That's the interesting part, right? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And so, sorry, I'm just going to jump back in. You were talking about
these are four turning times. Like this will be good. We can timestamp this and look back in a year and say,
exactly. We were talking about it, and we said some of these things. So you were talking about Israel and Rubio, and 2 weeks ago, I wasn't on here last week, but 2 weeks ago, I was saying, the bombing has sort of been polite, and oil's been kind of weak, and we'll see what happens after the election. You just said we've got sort of a war hawk Secretary of State potentially incoming, and the oil stocks have held in there, man, is what I was going to say. Like, I talked about, OPEC demand, OPEC supply cuts coming to an end a couple of weeks ago. The demand picture doesn't look that robust. And yet, like, these stocks are hanging in there. Like, they know something that hasn't transpired yet, right? So that's interesting to me. It's also interesting to me that, you say he's appointing a sort of a war hawkish cabinet because, not that I want a war, obviously, but when I start thinking about the fourth turning, the three probable outcomes are a fiscal calamity,
which is very much in play with the math. Just to be clear, everybody.
War or an all-out international war, and it seems like if the Trump administration sees or thinks or knows that they're going to inherit a fiscal mess, that they could shoot their way out of it. I'm thinking about this in real time, so I'm not sure, right? I mean, I don't know how it's going to play out, but like you said, it's going to be interesting to watch. It's one of the reasons, again, that you and I prepared our lives and portfolios the way we prepared them. And yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to play out. These people are younger. They're definitely from, outside the Beltway. They're not the insiders. People on both sides of the aisle aren't happy with their appointments. And so in that respect, like, yeah, I'm content to watch for sure.
It's going to be volatile, folks. All fourth turnings are a fiscal calamity and international escalation of the wars that we already have going on are very much in play, folks. And I don't say that rooting for that. I say that as somebody that would rather see everybody have upward mobility, live in peace, have opportunity, agree to disagree on things in a civil manner and go on with your lives, right? That's not the world that we live in, unfortunately. On the fiscal calamity side, it was interesting to me that Jerome Powell came out after, cutting 25 basis points, came out today and said exactly that. If there is a fiscal calamity, because they look at the numbers, despite them being scholars and them having 92 PhD peoples that always fuck everything up, they actually do look at the numbers. And I think they know the math doesn't add up. So what he said today was if there is a fiscal calamity, emergency tools will be put in place to mitigate it, which you know what that means. We're going to print more money, bitches. Like that's what it's going to be. And so if that happens, it'll be short-lived. They will print their way out of it until you can no longer print your way out of it. There will be a restructuring eventually of the monetary system because you can't be as fiscally irresponsible as we have been over the past 35, 40 years and have that end well And yeah, we can try to bomb our way out of it. And that's one approach. But again, I caution that comes with really, really, really severe consequences, man. And I don't get the warm and fuzzies here for the next several years. And it's not because of who's president. It's because of the way things have lined up, are lining up, and because where we are historically, and because I understand that the fourth turning is absolutely here. And
Nice. You know, it was pretty interesting to me that China was testing a new aircraft carrier and fighter
mm,
jet this week, right? And you know how I
mm,
talk about the aircraft carriers
yeah.
and what backs the U.S. dollar. So anyway,
Well,
marching
listen,
closer.
you voted for change, America, and you're going to get it. And I hope it's the best change for everybody, especially for those that need it the most, and that contribute, and that are a willing part of a civil society. I will say for one last election take, and this is clear as day to me, is that the mainstream media is absolutely dead on all
Oh
sides.
God.
On all sides. The right, the left, it's non-existent. Elon Musk, in a brilliant, brilliant move of chess, paid $133 million out of his pocket to control the new information platform, and buy himself a seat, an unofficial seat, because he's an immigrant that can't have an official seat, but an unofficial seat at the president's table. And that is a very, very, very powerful return on investment for 133 million. You could also argue the $44 billion Twitter buyout was a chess move in anticipation of positioning himself for being ultimately, next to Susie Wiles, who I like, his chief of staff, Mr. Trump's chief of staff, to be the second most influential person in the administration. So look, Robert Kennedy Jr. becoming your health secretary. Again, we voted for change. We're going to see a lot of it. Let's see how it shakes out. I think Jon Stewart said it best this past week. Obviously, rooting for America, rooting for Americans, and hope that it's not as turbulent as I think it's going to be. Back to the markets. Any last thoughts there on media and the end of traditional media? It's over. It's a wrap.
Well, it's a wrap, man. You know, I don't really do the traditional media anyway, but I did, I have DirecTV in my house, and they have this news mix channel where you can like toggle back and forth between CNN, CNBC, Fox, BBC, etc. And they're just like grids. So I go around on election night. I was looking, it was clear. I'm on the West Coast. It was pretty clear by 7, 8 p.m. who had won the election. I mean,
Oh
Poly
yeah,
market was up to 90 some. I told you about Bitcoin. The market was doing, it was absolutely clear. And they just refuse to discuss reality. Like there's no mention of what the markets are doing, what the betting markets are doing. It's still the guy with the glasses talking about bumfuck county in Michigan and why it matters. It's like, this shit's over, man. Like, I don't need you to analyze this on a county by county level. Like, it's clear to see. Like, there's just no acknowledgement of reality. And it not just on election night. I mean, leading up to it, right? I was been telling you about Poly market for weeks and weeks and weeks, man.
sure.
I was tweeting that dollars are better than opinions. I was tweeting that polls don't matter. I was telling you that how do you even poll anymore when no one answers their fucking phone? Like, do you know how the Poly market whale? So sorry, this is a meandering podcast. There was a French guy, a high net worth individual who was moving the
Yeah,
Poly market betting markets. Did you read about that?
yeah.
The way he did it was instead of direct phone surveys, he was using a type of study that asked, who do you think your neighbor would vote for? And so instead of asking people, who would you vote for? The question was,
Sure.
who do you think your neighbor would vote for? And those polls are like more accurate. Who to thunk it, right? This guy figured it out. And that's how he was able to sort of know like bet the Poly market in the right direction. So like there are ways to know out there, right? Like, did you see CNN reporting about the neighbor poll? Like, no, you didn't, right? Because they have a vested interest in it being a toss up and it being close and all these other things, right? So, the line I wrote was the media told you it was going to be a toss up, and it was a fucking beatdown, man. He won the popular vote for the first time since 2004. A Republican won Senate, House. I mean, it wasn't fucking close, man.
Nope, nope, not at all. Yeah. Interesting times, folks. I want to get back to gold. You mentioned 2533 being the level that it has to hold. That's crystal ball it. I personally think it holds. I personally see intervention around the world to sell dollars because it's getting to the point where a lot of foreign central banks are going to be in real trouble. And I mean, like, ready to blow up trouble if the dollar continues this surge. So I see China, I see Japan, I see a number of countries with large treasury holdings selling into the market to try to calm this down. And it actually wouldn't surprise me to see, and this might be a bit of a contrarian take, but given the comments this week from Jerome, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Jerome be even more aggressive on the next rate cut. Not that the bond market is cared. The bond market is basically, with both fingers, said, here you go, Mr. Powell, cut all
Yeah,
you
mortgage.
want. We're
Yeah.
going in one direction. So it's going to take more than that. But it's going to have to be an all hands on deck type of situation if we get a bond blow up somewhere that coincides with geopolitical tensions escalating. Oh, yeah, by the way, some guy was arrested for an assassination attempt on President Trump that wasn't carried out, that allegedly Iran paid for. And oh, yeah, by the way, there was a hearing on aliens where everybody said, yeah, they're real. And that shit barely made the news. Both those things barely made the news.
I saw the Iran assassination attempt. I didn't see the aliens.
It's Bizarro world, y'all. 2016, a beer got to this podcast, and now here we are 8 years later. And again, I'm gonna keep saying it. It's the most apt titled podcast out there. Period. So back to gold. Do you think it holds 25.33? And is silver in trouble yet, or is that $30 level the new floor that it has to hold? And I'll front run you a little bit. I think gold is still solid. I think short term bearish, mid term, long term, absolutely bullish. Same for silver.
Crystal balls are hard. Gold was very worrisome for the beginning part of this week. It acted better today. It made me think that it was going to sort of hold that trend line there that I was mentioning. Gold stocks are scarier, man. They really just ate shit when gold went down $200, despite most of the economic studies and feasibility studies, et cetera, being done at prices that are still well below where we're at now. I think gold holds as well at that mid 25 level. Silver and copper, I'm more cautious on, and I've been cautious on copper for months. I told you I wasn't buying. I told you I wasn't buying it because China was stimulating. Like, that wasn't it, man. So I wait to see. 2 weeks ago silver was precious. Now it's industrial again. So I've got to wait and see on the copper. I queued up I talk in terms of companies, right? I looked at FCX, I looked at Arrow, I looked at Southern. I'm not buying them yet. Let me see if this is, like, I want the real growth, right? Like, I want the Department of Government Efficiency to usher in this manufacturing boom that they're talking about. Like, I need to see that as opposed to just talk about it, right? So the talk is there. I would love for there to be an American manufacturing boom, and we open up mines and we build things here at home, chips and batteries and all sorts of stuff. Like, I would love that. We got
the right guy there advising for that with Elon, and he clearly has got the president's ear, because I mean, like I said, brilliant campaigning between Susie Wiles, his newly elected chief of staff and campaign manager, and Elon Musk. They absolutely, and pardon the pun, everybody, ran a train on the Democratic Party on this go around. Absolutely top to bottom. And you had to give the Trumpster credit. You got to give Mr. Trump credit. He campaigned his ass off. He's the one that was on Joe Rogan for 3 hours. It didn't matter if Democrats thought he sounded nonsensical. He wasn't talking to you. He wasn't on there for you. It didn't matter that, he looked tired at some of the campaign events. He was all over the place campaigning his ass off. So, I look back to Hillary's campaign when she blew it by not campaigning in Pennsylvania and not doing some of the things that she should have done. And it's somewhat ironic because, like oftentimes Democrats do, they took for granted the Democratic vote. And Democrats are, I saw a picture of Gavin Newsom earlier, who I think is a talented politician, but still a politician. And he was walking with a security detail through Skid Row in California and LA, where, there's hundreds and thousands of homeless people there. And he's walking with a Starbucks cup in his suit with his perfectly combed and perfectly cut hair. And, what I tweeted was, Democrats, when they try to make sure that everyday Americans of all political affiliations, this is how they let them know that they're still in touch.
Sure, the people that voted Trump in don't exclude food and energy from their CPI, man.
Exactly. So again, not a political endorsement at all. Not an indication of favoritism. I want America to win. I want deregulation. I want a smarter approach to the amount of money we spent before we blow up completely. I want less war. I want access to health care for women. Yes, I absolutely want that. I hope, I hope that, there's a softening in tone in regards to that. And if we're going to leave it to the states, I hope that states do the right thing
They did.
by their female constituents.
Montana did.
Yeah, I don't want morality police deciding whether it's moral or immoral for a woman to make a decision about her body. I want that to be between that woman and her faith and whatever, God she does or does not pray to. That is not for me to decide. And I don't think it's for politicians to decide. So, you can't have all of that in one administration. So let's see what we get, right? It's going to be interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sorry to go back to stocks, I could see a thing where, you get gold at 26 or 2,700 and then, the cash flows finally start going, coming out of the majors and you get a scenario where the stocks start doing better in that sort of, growth scenario that we were just talking about, if it is truly unleashed. So I'm excited about what's ahead. And I think we're still in a gold bull market and now a crypto bull market to be sure. So, I was going to go to Utah, speaking of weird
I
religions.
was just
but
going to ask you. You beat me to it. I was just going to say, speaking of gold, you were just at a gold project of, a company that we're very biased about. I visited Bear Trek Arnett, one of the two co-flagships of the Revival Gold is the company, right? And the infrastructure, the leadership at Bear Track Arnett is top notch. The economics are absolutely fantastic. But you went and visited a newish project that the company rolled in here recently that has the potential to go into production much sooner than Bear Track Arnett and could be very profitable very quickly. How was the site visit?
it was a really good site visit. And a couple of things to preface this little section of the podcast. One, this is sort of the stuff you'll get in 2025 as part of the paid version of the podcast. We've said that we're going to make this paid in 2025 and sections and information like this are one of the reasons why. The other preface I would say is keep a company called Perpetua in mind. It used to be called Midas. There was a stock that, we've been in for 10 years now, or at least covered for 10 years or more. It's been in permitting since 2016. And, this is a stock that was $2 or $3 a year or two ago, and is climbed to 10 or 12 or $14, depending on which exchange you're looking at. So, and Revival is an analogous story, is why I say that Midas has a very large gold asset in Stibnite, Idaho, that has just received its draft permit from the Forest Service, and that's why that stock has been going up. It's something like 6 to 10 million ounces, likely more than that, at Midas Perpetua I'm talking about.
Yep.
Revival, as you said, has the Bear Track Arnett project. That's a past producing asset. And we've also been around this story for a long time. So I wrote my first check into, it wasn't even Revival. It was, I think, Strata Minerals in 2017, and have been invested and have written additional checks since then. It hasn't worked out in our favor yet. But I haven't sold many shares, and I still have warrants, and I think the team is doing the right thing, and they have a lot of gold. So let's get to that.
Yeah.
They have over 6 million ounces of gold now. That makes them one of the leading gold developers in the Western U.S. Most of that gold is at Bear Track Arnett, which is a past producing asset. That's the one in Idaho. The one in Utah is called Merkur, just like Mercury, but without the Y. And that's because it used to be a mercury silver mine. I'm going to give you the whole thing because I was just there. So sorry. It was discovered in 1870. That was before Utah was even a state, and it was originally mined underground. About 1 million ounces came out of high grade underground in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And then Getty started mining it via open pits and carbon and leach in the late 1970s and early 1980s. And it was, in fact, the first mine that was used cyanide in commercial fashion, the Merkur mine. And It was also the first Carlin-style mine, even though it's in Utah, and even though they didn't know it was a Carlin-style mine. They then found the Carlin-style mines in Nevada, and they realized, oh shit, this one over
Yeah.
in Utah is also a Carlin-style mine. So anyway, Getty sold it to Barrick in the early 1980s. Barrick mined it until 1998. And that's when a few mines closed because gold went down to $300. Barrick left in a hurry. You'll recall this
Mm.
from Bear
Yep.
Track. Even at
Sure.
Mercer, there's something like a couple of 100,000 ounces on the leach
On the
pads because
pad.
they left in haste. They also didn't crush the ore that they put on the pads. So 80% went into the mill, 20% went into the pads. They didn't crush it. They just ran it through a sifter. So some of the ore on the pads is huge. It's not crushed to the right size. So they only got 50% recoveries from the stuff they put on the pad. So there's still, if they got 50% recovery, what's left? Well, half the gold that was on the pad is still there.
Yeah.
There's also mineralization around the fringe of all the pits. There's like 4 or 5 pits that they mine from, and they never drill below the pits. So you have to assume that they end in mineralization. The other thing that happened or didn't happen is they never drilled really below 215 meters. Everybody, I say, Barrick, Newmont, they all went to Nevada, right? And that's where they're mining, and they're still mining there. It's been 3 decades, right?
Good
And
call. Barrett,
yes,
got that one right.
absolutely. And now they're finding the Carlin mineralization in the intrusives all the way down to 400 to 900 meters.
Right.
But that's never been drilled at Mercer, right? So we had the whole geologic presentation about, why they think they could have the mineralization just like exists in the Carlin trend, et cetera. But that's really not what they're excited about or going after, although that that blue sky, high grade geologic exploration potential at depth is exciting. They want to mine. So I think what you're seeing is Mercer is going to jump in front of Bear Track in terms of priority. They think they can get it shovel ready in 36 months.
Okay.
It has a bit of a different permitting track. There's no federal agencies involved. It's a Utah oil and gas and mining agency. And as long as they keep the pad, and they're doing these design studies now, they're doing the PEA, as long as they keep the pad off certain patented claims, then they don't have to trigger the federal mining process, the federal permitting process. And the last time it went through this Utah agency, Department of Oil, Gas, and Mines, so Dogma or something. Anyway, they found no significant disturbance was the finding, and so they didn't even have to do an EIS. They didn't even have to do an environmental impact statement. And so the team is thinking they can take this into production and get to cash flows. And I don't want to just keep talking. I want to say why they want to do that, right? So there's different things you can do, right? With your money, you can drill, but they have 6 million ounces of gold is what the CEO would tell you. Why do we need more gold? Companies aren't really getting, new discoveries might be being rewarded, but adding marginal ounces to something that's already 6 million ounces isn't going to move the needle. You might say, well, get a strategic to come in and put a stamp of approval on the thing. And they would say, yeah, but then you're at the mercy of the strategic, who is likely going to want you to drill and show you how big it's going to be, because the strategic is going to want something big. So why don't we just try to get this into production, raise what we have to raise on our own to get it there, and then try to get this company valued on a discounted cash flow model or some other valuation, as opposed to the 7 cents per ounce that they're getting now in the ground. So I could keep going. The entire board was there. So then I got to spend some time with them. There's some real people on the board. I guess I would talk specifically about Larry Radford, who went from an Idaho kid here just in Coeur d'Alene to running all of Hecla's mines around the world. And now he's retired, but in talking to him, his phone rings often from the folks that operate the Carlin complex over there. He lives in Reno. He's a serious mine operator, and he's very keen, I think, on this project, this Mercer project, and thinks it can be a mine. So anyway, I'm bullish on Revival. It hasn't worked out. They need to raise money. They're down to $2 million in the treasury. You can figure all that out from, clicking through an MD&A, but you can't sort of talk to Larry and talk to the geologist and see what they're thinking about this project by not going to the site visits. And that's why we do those things. So I came away, I won't say inspired, but, I'm not selling my shares. I want to stick with the project.
Reassured for sure.
For sure. It was a good site visit. Yeah, they got the right team in place. John Myers doing his thing. They added The guy's name's Dan Pace, who's a geologist mainly on the Bear Track, but he's, doing his thing down there in Utah as well. And so, yeah, content to stick with it for sure, and think they've got something going on there. So I don't know if I can answer any questions, but hopefully that was a good overview.
Well, and folks, look, and this is why we're going to put this part of the podcast behind a paywall here soon, right? Because you just essentially went ahead and met with the board of directors and got a presentation on the geology and the upside and the business model for the next 36 months. You pretty much just came with us through Nick's visit and the time and the effort and expense that he took to be able to go and do that and bring that to you. Nick mentioned that he initially wrote a check when this company was private before going public, and it had a different name. For those of you that are accredited investors, again, I'm going to, pound the table here a little bit. I think we have one of the, if not the premier accredited investor services. And I highly encourage those of you that are looking for deal flow, that are looking for access to deal flow that, it's taken us almost 2 decades to come up with the network that we've been able to build for that deal flow. And, we're fortunate enough that the people that advise us have been doing this for 3 or 4 decades, and the people that advise them are people that have seen half a century of deal flow and, are connected at the highest levels. So I say all that to say, you should be subscribing to some of our other services, and hopefully over the past, God, it's been 8 years, Nick, you found value in this free podcast and enough value to justify, what's it going to be, like a cup of coffee a week, Nick? Is that what we said?
Yeah, it's gonna be cheap.
Yeah. It'll still be very, very affordable. But I do want to emphasize why it's going behind the paywall. And then again, I hope that you all have found value over the last 8 years and continue to for the next several. We're not going anywhere. And I don't think the world's going to get any less bizarre. So I think we'll still be employed here by ourselves over the next several years. Mr. Hodge, anything else to get off your chest? That was, I think, a good post-election introduction to the nominees that we're getting from President Trump and why it's consequential in many ways to not just the markets, but the world and us individually, right?
I think that was a good podcast. I would just mention one more thing about private placements is that we have another one that's open. We've been bringing these to you in pretty quick succession. We did a uranium one recently at, I think it was, gosh, I don't even want to say, it was 11 cents and the stock's already above 20 cents. And then we did a Mexican high grade silver underground play that's ready to drill. That deal's not even closed yet. I believe it's at 25 cents, Jordan, or
25 cents with a 40-cent warrant, and shares hit 44 cents today, and the deal's not closed yet, folks. So
there you go. These deals are okay, and that's with what we just said, gold stocks taking it on the chin in the past couple of weeks. So we have one that's open now. They're raising $10 to $15 million. They'll be drilling the pretty exciting, if not high risk, or if high risk, I guess. Is the world's largest gravity anomaly. So it's sort of a binary play, high risk exploration play. We do all sorts of different deals, right? Development deals, brownfields deals, all sorts of stuff, right? This is a gravity anomaly that's never been drilled, but that the Geological Society of Canada says has a medium to high probability of hosting massive sulfide mineralization. And so it's deep. You got to drill sort of 1,000 to 2,000 meter holes in the middle of the Arctic, but it can be done. There's a mine that B2 Gold is building in Nunavut right now, a $1.5 billion mine that will pour its first gold next year. So
good timing.
It can be done, and for me, it's worth taking the flyer just because of that, the caliber of the target, right? So if they hit, it's going to be very good for everyone involved, and there's some really good people involved. So I don't think they'll have a problem raising the money, and they'll be drilling come the spring. That deal is open till, I want to say, November 22nd. So get on your horse and ride if you have any interest in doing private placements, and to check out private placement intel either by some link you find below this podcast or by calling, I think I can do it now, 844-334-4700.
Well done, sir. Well done, sir. And you should also go to dailyprofitcycle.com patreon.com/subscribe for access to several links to the many sites that we operate and co-own. Did you get that number right,
That's
Mr.
right.
Hodge?
I got it right. 844-334-4700. And look, people are doing it. So, you might think we're salesmen or whatever, and maybe we are, but look, you gotta sell your product, you gotta market your product, and we think we have a good one, and people buy it. Someone was telling me recently that I should talk more about who's on the service. There's people on the service like Doug Casey, and he said publicly that he gets private placement deals from us. There's people on the service like Bob Bishop or Robert Bishop, who was a newsletter writer in the 80s and 90s and is still well known in those spheres and is still active writing about mining and diamonds and other things.
The legend in the
Um,
space.
Jeff Phillips is on that service, who some of you will know. And then, there's lots of broker dealers. If I were to search our database for whatever,
Oh, yeah.
Haywood or Canaccord or whatever it was, like you'll see that there's brokers and there's executives on the list. And then, there's people who manage money for other people. So a couple of weeks ago, we were doing a shtick like this, inviting people to participate in a private placement. A subscriber who was a subscriber of one of our other services, stepped up, decided to join private placement intel. It turns out, I don't want to talk too much about him because people like their privacy, but former professional athlete. Now he's a money manager, well-known guy in his circles. He's flying to New Orleans to meet us. By the way, we'll be in New Orleans this week.
Yeah.
By the time you see this, at the New Orleans Investment Conference, and this gentleman's managing his capital and capital for other people, and he's getting, or at least sourcing some of his deals from Nick Hodge and Gerardo Del Real, and just sort of put a finer point on it and relate it back to some of the stuff we talked to, like. That legacy media is dying. And in some ways, the legacy, brokerages are dying as well. And in terms of the ways they source and vet and get deals to their clients. And so if you're able to get in a deal ahead of the brokerage financing, at an earlier stage and with some level of vetting that applies to it, not just because we're getting a commission, we'll give you this deal, then that might be a better way. Just like Twitter might be a better source of media, or Joe Rogan now, leads the podcasting industry as opposed to CNN. Like, sources of information like Nick and Gerardo's private placement intel are on par with what used to be the sources of deal flow that came from
Yep.
brokerages and things. So the world has changed. The world is changing. For some reason, I still can't figure it out. I'm a Wall Street tycoon. Like I've been telling you guys this for weeks. If I read the articles about the people who pay the taxes in my state that they pay, I'm an ultra wealthy Wall Street tycoon. So if you want that deal flow, then by all means, check out private placement intel.
No, things are definitely changing, and it's going to be important to keep track of that change, keep on pace, and to evolve with the change. I've got to do it just to, again, I'm going to pound the table a little bit. But the high grade silver Mexican deal that we're pretty confident is going to turn out very, very, very lucrative for us. Our group and our subscribers took down the entire deal. That was a non-brokered deal that had banks falling over themselves to give the company money. And it was our relationship with advisors and the company and the principals involved and our ability to take the entire deal that allowed for us to have a seat at that table and say, we actually don't want any banks to be involved and don't need any banks to be involved. We want to make sure when we hit in a couple of months, high grade silver over large widths, and then we start proving up the district scale nature of this consolidated past producing district, we want to make sure that, people aren't flipping their shares for the warrants. We want to make sure that we get the most orange out of that juice, or the most juice out of that orange, right? And the way you do that is by keeping track of who owns the shares, where they're at, making sure that you're not front running catalyst and just flipping the shares for the warrant without letting the business model play itself out and the business thesis play itself out. So I just, I wanted to put a fine point on that one and the vetting that goes into a lot of these deals. It's not a coincidence that, track record's pretty damn good on those. So I'll leave you all with that. I do want to say a happy belated Veterans Day to everybody out there. The Bens, the Raouls, the Daves, you all know who you are. Look, it's an interesting time in our country. I think it's going to get even more interesting. And happy Veterans Day, because the service is absolutely appreciated.
Absolutely. Wouldn't be here without them.
Love it. Love it. That's it folks. I am Gerardo Del Real along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was the 293rd episode of our weekly therapy session we call Investing in Bizarro World. It's interesting, everybody. Somebody tweeted that the Hamburglar should be in charge of the food administration, the health department. It's gonna get even more interesting. Keep nice, keep kind. Do better for your community. Do better for your people. Do better for your family. Do better by yourself. But let's keep moving this American experiment forward, y'all. See if we can't ramp it up and make it a better version of what it's been recently. Take care, everybody. Send us off, Mr. Hodge.
Have a good week. We're coming up on a quarter millennia anniversary for this experiment that is the U.S. in 2026. So definitely looking forward to that. Have yourselves a good rest of the week.
Hey there, you independent-minded investor. If you like this video, make sure to tell us so by clicking the like button below. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another one. And share it with everyone you know on social media. You can also click the link in the description below to check out more information-packed videos just like this one. Thanks for watching.